It is? Okay. So welcome to the 7th installment in the series of virtual brown bag lunch webcasts related to the work of the Curriculum Standards Panel, brought to you by the National CyberWatch Center. Today's topic is CTFs in the classroom. My name is David Toby. I'll be your host and the director. I'm the Director of Research and Assessments for the National CyberWatch Center. Previous webcasts in this series have covered a variety of topics. The earliest one that actually I did was looking at closing the cybersecurity skills gap by providing an overview of competency-based mastery learning concepts. Those are the concepts and techniques that we are highlighting in each of the virtual brown bag lunch webcasts. Dr. Robert Gandhi, who's actually on the line here with us today, next did a presentation on designing assessments for competency-based education. Alan Watkins, who led our Information Security Fundamentals Curriculum Standards Panel in its first year, did a presentation on that panel entitled An Open Source Model for Creating Competency-Based Cybersecurity Curricula. Casey O'Brien, who I see is also here with us today, then did a session on a specific curriculum focused on network scanning. Jim Hogue followed that with one on cyber hygiene and security awareness. And last month, Terrence Campbell did a presentation on enterprise infrastructure hardening strategy. So today will be an extension of each of these, and we will be having these events every month on the second Wednesday and Friday of the month. Before we begin, you need to be aware again that the session is being recorded, and anything spoken or shared on screen by the host or presenter or any of the participants will be part of the recording. If you object to being recorded, you should either not speak during the session or you may simply disconnect from the session altogether. All participants have been placed on mute upon entry. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment during the session, please use the chat window to post your questions and comments. We will address all questions at the end of the webcast. Now let's get started. So Josh, if you wouldn't mind going to your next slide, let me just introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Josh Stroschein. Dr. Stroschein is a subject matter expert in malware analysis, reverse engineering, and software exploitation. He is an assistant professor of cybersecurity at Dakota State University, where he teaches malware analysis, reverse engineering, software exploitation, and other related security topics. Dr. Stroschein is also an accomplished trainer, providing training in the aforementioned subject areas at Black Hat, DerbyCon, and Hack in the Box in Amsterdam. I will now turn over the presentation to Josh to begin the webcast. It's all yours, Josh.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Hopefully I can navigate the system okay. If there are any issues, please feel free to chime in and let me know as far as questions or anything I need to address. I'm just in the screen share mode. On this slide, before we move on, I just wanted to point out my email address. Anything that I talk about today, if you have any questions or if there's anything further that I can provide for you, please don't, what's going on? Don't hesitate to reach out to me at that email address. You may receive out of office from time to time. That's just a mechanism I've developed to deal with the overwhelming amount of email that I endure in the academic life. Okay, today's agenda, just a real quick rundown here. Going to begin by talking about why I consider and why I think everyone should consider running CTFs in the classroom. I want to discuss some complications around CTFs, some things that initially frustrated me and caused me to seek out and really develop my own framework, which seems to be a little bit of what everyone is doing. And then also some complications that arose as I started to actually use the CTFs in the classroom. Talk a little bit about curriculum development and how I approach and really kind of modified my curriculum development around the inclusion of the CTF. As I said, I'll discuss some of the aspects of this custom CTF framework, but I won't spend too much time on it because it is available for free online and you can spend some time there yourself. Discuss some instructional components and some assessment considerations, as well as some limitations, some of those things that I learned as I started to use CTFs. I want to point out some future work, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So why capture the flag? I always think it's a good point to start this conversation is just to discuss why and what motivation lies within using these. As an early student of cybersecurity and as an ongoing student of cybersecurity, I found CTFs to be really, a fun and engaging way to try to learn new material and new skills, and also apply that in these dynamic environments. I didn't always use CTFs for the challenge aspect. I didn't necessarily always care if I was going to be high on the leaderboard. I just wanted to learn new things. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to include them in the classroom, to provide students with a way to work as individuals or as teams to really challenge and engage them in this slightly different environment for them to learn, to compete. And so that was really one of my core motivations. The challenges are challenging, and that's one of the points, and that I can oftentimes, and I will, it's necessary to map the learning objectives within the challenges, of course, to my course material, but then to also provide them with a little bit more an unknown environment in which they have to, use some critical thinking and to apply the skills that they have learned previous in the semester into these new environments and adapt to that. Of course, they're meant to be educational, but I would argue that not all CTFs are, that some of them are solely competition-based, and that's their primary focus. And so they can leave some educational aspects out of it, which again, I'll address a little bit more here in this presentation. Of course, they're used as a recruitment tool. They're also used as an opportunity to provide capabilities assessment. And I think this is also an interesting area. I probably won't spend too much time discussing it today, but hopefully it comes up again in the Q&A at the end of today's talk. In that I think we can also use them, in an academic sense to help us gauge the capabilities of our students coming in. At Dakota State, we have a doctoral program in cybersecurity, now cyber operations, and we found it challenging with the background of the students. Some of them are accomplished industry professionals with years of development experience, but it doesn't always necessarily translate into those core cybersecurity skills that we're looking all of our students to have as a baseline coming into the program. So using some sort of an interactive CTF type tool to not only provide that assessment and to give us from the program administration side some insight into the students coming in, but also to give them that kind of feedback so that they know where, according to our standards, they're maybe a little deficient. And then we can also potentially adopt the CTF to deliver additional challenges to them so that they can begin to work on filling those skill gaps. So some of the early complications that I would encounter, and I think most do encounter these when dealing with CTFs, is that of course, I didn't set out to write my own. I figured that would be just far too redundant, and I really didn't want to take the time to do that. And by write, of course, I mean enlist the help of some undergraduate students to do all the code writing. I didn't write any of the code of this platform, for better or for worse. But it just required, of all the free or open source solutions out there, there was just a wide variety of technical know-how to get those set up. Some of them, like the Facebook CTF platform, are really visually appealing. They provide different methods or game modes, but they just take time to get set up. And I really didn't want to have to go through this process of setting them up every time I wanted to run a CTF. That, of course, means I also need infrastructure, and sometimes the university is good at providing that infrastructure. Sometimes it was more of a challenge. It also depends on how accessible I want my CTFs to be. Do I want them publicly accessible, or is it just going to be internal only? And of course, depending on the visibility there will determine how, where on the network this server actually will sit to host the CTF and how much hardening will go into that box itself. Because at the end of the day, I don't want students to hack the infrastructure, just the challenges. Another big area was what I considered a hint or a help system, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, in that we don't really have, CTFs are really designed, in my mind, a lot of them anyway, at least especially early on, to not necessarily be educational. And so I wanted to provide a CTF that allowed me the ability to interject at what I perceived as key moments in analyzing a challenge. And my career and academic research interests, malware analysis and reverse engineering, really drive generally the type of challenges I make. So when a student's trying to reverse a binary, there are certain decision points or analysis points where they can make the wrong assessment. And if I can embed hints or help into those binaries, into the CTF platform, then instead of them getting stuck there, perhaps that hint at the cost of points in the CTF, that can help them move along and actually learn what is there. We don't know what we don't know, and I want to help them to provide that. And that's something that I encountered early on in my CTF competitions, is that when I got stuck on a challenge, I could spend hours trying to Google how to solve it. And because, especially with malware and reversing it's a really undocumented area, right? It's not always easy to find that type of information, that type of documentation. Challenges are another one, and there'll be some things I want to point out in the framework here that I'm trying to address. One of the probably overarching themes for today's talk is just that I want to continue to, or at least start to build a community, more of a community directly involved with the CTFs in the classroom, and how we can better adopt those for those academic purposes. So challenges are a tough one, because challenges once used, the flags, the keys, the how to solve it is generally gets out there. Students tend to share those. They like to post things online. CTF write-ups, those are actually a pretty popular thing within the community to see. And so it's difficult, even if you go in and change the flag, if how to solve that, define that flag and the challenge is published, right? It's difficult to reuse that CTF anymore, or that challenge anymore, and have confidence that students are just finding the answers, the solutions online. You also have to create typically a varying level of difficulties in a different number of categories. And this is a little less complicated, I think, if you're just doing it for your own course material. But if you want to maybe have something that's a little bit broader, every year we run a CTF for kind of the broader CAE community, in which case, no idea the kind of students or participants we're going to get. And so we try to offer a wider number of challenges with varying levels of difficulties. And that's very time consuming. Something else that I'd like to just bring up for discussion, hopefully in the QA here, is just mapping our learning outcomes, something that we don't do right now, but that the framework, and I think any CTF framework really, could be fairly easily adopted to do. So one of the things that I've included in the framework is this repository of challenges that we can all contribute to and then use in our own CTFs. There's some pros and cons to that, of course, but the idea is to try to make it easier to run a CTF. And on top of that, we could tag the challenges that are contributed and map those to different frameworks or knowledge units, so that way when you create a CTF, you have better confidence, or you have the confidence that the CTF is in fact covering these knowledge units. I found grading to be very difficult, and probably one of the the biggest limitations is that there is of course no direct way that I've come across to integrate with a learning management system or grading platform, but also just the process of actually assessing how the student did. And I think the help system kind of addresses that, and that students that are purchasing the hints or the help, that gives me some insight into where they got stuck during the competition. But it's still a kind of a gray area. It's really a loose measurement of their overall performance, because again, at the end of the day, a CTF, either you get the points or you don't. And so it's a very binary environment for trying to assess how the student actually did. I'm probably going to get long-winded, so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit on some of these slides. Typical CTF, attack, defend, and Jeopardy style. This platform that I'm going to be introducing you to today is Jeopardy style. You have a game board, you have different categories, the challenges that fall underneath those, really designed for solo, but you can also make them a team effort, and the platform actually supports both. Generally a little bit easier to set up. I mean, the challenge development itself can be complicated and time-consuming, but once the challenge is created, it's generally a file, a binary file or something that you can then provide the student to download and analyze. Flare-On is a good example of that. The Attack Defend is more CCDC, the Collegiate Cyber Defense competition, in which there's systems that students are trying to protect from a red team. Those systems have scoring agents built into them that sync up with the scoring server. And so there's more infrastructure. There's usually, you need to be on premise to really compete, although there's a lot of virtual infrastructure that allows for that to happen as well. But they're just a little bit more intensive in terms of logistical setup and technical know-how and different resources there. So one of the things that I had to tackle early on, of course, was making sure that the challenges that I created were mapped directly to the learning objectives of my course. And that is one of the biggest benefits of running your own CTF, is that you control every aspect of it. That also means that you control every aspect of it. As I mentioned, the help system, I've been able to adopt it as I've run more CTFs to help me try to glean some insight into how the challenges went and how the competition went. So not just did students purchase hints for the different challenges that I created for them, but also how many challenges, what were the total number of incorrect flag submissions, and what were the total number of solves. A lot of incorrect flag submissions mean that perhaps it's the wrong flag. That's always a real possibility with CTFs, but also there's certain analysis decisions that they're making that are incorrect, and hopefully I can learn from some of that information on how to better either instruct or the course material, or also the challenges that I've created for that particular CTF. So there are the back-end information that you get from looking at the totality of the CTF and how the students did, that can help you understand exactly how effective those challenges were to mapping your learning objectives for your course. So this is CTF, evilcodecom. I'm not a marketing person, so this was just the catchiest domain name that I could come up with. .coms are pretty hard to come by nowadays. It's a hosted CTF platform, so one of the things I wanted to address with it was this time investment of having to set up the software and set up the environment every time you wanted to run a CTF. So this is hosted. You can run as many concurrent CTFs. Okay, PowerPoint just crashed. You can tell I'm on a Mac. This happens far more frequently than I would like. Okay. There we go. I think we're recovered now. So as far as the system, it's a very small DigitalOcean droplet, so very few resources, but it is hosted. So as long as I don't run out of resources, which I monitor, then we can run as many concurrent CTFs as we'd like. So you just have to go there. You can create an account, and off you go. As long as you can find the challenges, you have a platform to use. It is Jeopardy style, and it does have a hint or help system. So right now there's no cost. The hosting is $5 a month. I just pay for that out of pocket because I'm really passionate about seeing this community grow. But going forward, I'd like to find other alternatives to help really support the infrastructure needed for. Let's see. I've got Bill's screen now. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. And there's just a quick screenshot. Okay, I tend to use CTFs as an end of semester exercise. I substitute it for my final. It is cumulative, and what I'm trying to really get with those is not just another, not just another lab, but an opportunity to then apply everything that we've learned throughout the semester. So leading up to the CTF, I use labs, and labs provide those core skills and the practice that the students need. And then the CTF is kind of the training wheels come off, and here you go. Now you're in an unknown environment with unknown challenges, and it's up to you to apply everything that we've learned in order to figure it out and be successful. So they are somewhat self-directed, and that oftentimes, and is the case with the Evil Code framework, the game board, the students can choose any order of challenge that they want. Now, generally, the points dictate the overall level of perceived difficulty. 100 points is easy, 200 points is more difficult, 300 points is really challenging. But they can tackle a 300-point one right away. And of course, this gets into, there's some strategy to how you would capture points in a CTF that I don't think we need to get into right now. Choose challenge types right now. Standard challenge, that's just you create a challenge and upload some files to it. And then there's multiple choice challenge. So if you want something that's more question and answer based. Here's an example of the hint system. So hints are arbitrary. You can create any number of hints for any given challenge, whether it's a Q&A or just a standard challenge. And you define the text, that's free-form text. So you have to, of course, understand your challenge. And then off to the right, you're able to assign any, oh my goodness. And you're able to assign any number of points to it. So it's up to you to make sure that those do actually make sense. What I typically do is if it's a 10-point challenge, then the hints will eventually, if they use all the hints, it will give them a 0-point net gain for solving that particular challenge.
Can't see the screen, Josh, if you...
I know my PowerPoint keeps crashing. Again, I'm highlighting, I think, the state of Apple's products right now. Let me go back to... Okay, is it back? There we go. So there's the points. There are some considerations for, I kind of alluded to it earlier about the competition, kind of the competition nature of a CTF. Of course, this is a little bit more difficult to use as a grading instrument, to have, you know, everybody competing and their overall score, if their score is deriving in some way, shape, or form their actual grade for that final, to have that on display for everyone to see. Not only that, but just trying to find other ways to engage students in a CTF itself. So there are some display options. The standard display is just that, it's a scoreboard, everyone can see everybody. We have an anonymized display, so there's still a scoreboard, so you can still have a general understanding of where you sit in the competition, but nobody can necessarily identify each other unless they figure out who has what points. You can have an individual performance, so if you just want to see the scoreboard as just you can't see anybody else that's competing, and then you can completely shut the scoreboard off. And there's just a few screenshots here. And you'll see all those if you go through and set up a CTF. As I mentioned, there is a repository, and one of the initial motivations for this is just to reduce that time it takes to run a CDC, a CTF, cyber defense competition, and that we can all, as a community, start to contribute challenges to this platform. And that's available. It actually is in a beta phase or a beta stage right now. That we can test to. I have on my to-do list to actually start contributing some of my challenges there, so that there's hopefully some momentum to start using those and contributing back to the system. There's visibility issues. Who should have access to those? Of course, we don't want students getting access to those because then they could see the solutions. And that's one of the things that the challenges that I want people to contribute will have is some level of write-up, so that you and I don't have to we don't have to reverse the binary ourselves or whatever, or the PCAP or whatever the challenge is based off of, in order to figure out what exactly is going on there. There's some solution to help us with that. And I also mentioned something that we don't currently support, but I think would be a very positive value add to any CTF framework, would be some of those mappings to be able to, as you upload a challenge, tag it as a CAE CyberOps KU in software reverse engineering. So that way you can start to build CTFs based off of those external requirements. Overall, I think there's been a lot of very positive things for using CTFs. Definitely, I can't measure, but I can definitely feel the enthusiasm for the students in using CTFs. They are very common in this field, so it's a good opportunity to introduce them to CTFs. For a lot of my students, it's the first time that they actually get a chance to compete in one, even though most of them are aware of what a CTF is. It's a great opportunity. I typically have sections or courses that are both online and on campus, and it's a relatively easy way to engage both the online and the on-campus students and kind of bring them together as one course. I have experimented with team versus solo efforts, and both have their pros and cons, of course. And then I think it ultimately increases exposure for the students to different techniques, different topics, different tools, and that I can provide them with challenges that we may not have necessarily covered in that specific context, but they know how to analyze those. So maybe my course focuses on the PE file format and Windows native code executables, but then I can give them a Java binary, right? And they know how to analyze file formats. They know how to look for, and they have an understanding of the reverse engineering process. They're just applying it in a different environment with different tools. So I oftentimes use it to increase that exposure to those different tools and techniques. I found assessment to be very difficult, even to this day, and something that I didn't really think much when I embarked on developing or using CTFs in the classroom. I really don't have a rubric around the CTFs, and as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of hard to know exactly where students ended up, where they got stuck, and how well they actually did on the challenges, because either they get it or they don't oftentimes. So as I mentioned, I'm trying to use that help system in order to identify that. I've also been considering experimenting with, much like with embedding help at certain points in the process, also putting numerous flags in a binary, and those flags are going to be at what I consider key analytical points. And if they're submitting those flags, then I can automatically provide them some insight to say, okay, you're on the right track, but you're not quite there. Now you should consider doing this. A lot of things still on our to-do list. There's no branding. This isn't meant to be a commercial endeavor. But there's still things that I think anyone who wants to use the platform would like to have their own custom branding, even logos and themes. There's no unlockable sequential challenges. It doesn't integrate with any cloud environments. I would really love to be able to expand the challenges to be able to deploy a VM or even an environment within say the Amazon cloud. And so part of the goal there is then to attack another VM. There are no programming challenges either. And there's some things that we'd like to do, I think, to expand maybe into what I would consider younger demographics, younger audience, maybe make the system itself a little more gamified. I'm a product of the 80s, so my mind went immediately to this, the screenshot up in the upper right, this Nintendo NES 8-bit graphics where the game board is more interactive. They get to explore and find the challenges and unlock challenges based off of the ones that they previously completed, and bosses could drop down and just make it a little bit fun, even though they're still learning the same thing. It's just a little bit more visually appealing. It's a little more of a game to them. Okay, I almost went a little long, so that's all I have.
Okay, great. So as we conclude today's session, if you would like more details on the Curriculum Standards Panel and the content being developed, please visit the website shown here. I've also posted the same information and links in the chat, although the chat seemed to overwrite one of those links. At any rate, and you can send us an email with your questions. We'd like to open the floor, if you will, to any questions or comments. Again, as a reminder, please post your question or comment in the chat, and we'll have Josh address that. While we're waiting for those to kind of come up with their thoughts on what they'd like to contribute, let me start by just asking you one question, Josh, which is, how might those listening to the webcasts either today or in the future in the recorded session apply the lessons learned from the challenges and successes that you've experienced in facilitating their transition to perhaps looking at competency-based and mastery learning in their institutions?
Well, I think the biggest is probably just trying to find a community that we can all converse about these CTFs in. I mean, almost every instructor or academician that I've talked to is using or considering using CTFs in some or something like a CTF in some way, shape, or form. And this is external to CCDCs or other competitions that their students might be involved in. And so there's a lot of momentum there. There's a lot of thought there. There's a lot of initiative and effort, a lot of custom frameworks. But it doesn't seem like at least I haven't found a central place where we can all go to discuss this. I think the closest thing is the nice working group has the competition subgroup, and that's a great resource. And by no means am I trying to duplicate efforts. If what I'm proposing here is already being done, I'm just not aware of it, then I'd like to focus our energy to that. But I think to me that would be a great place to start, is to talk to somebody who's already been through it and can help fill in those gaps. Part of those lessons learned for me is going to manifest itself in the framework. And so having help and having a repository and some of those, the infrastructure that's just there and ready to go and someone else is taking care of. Although I don't provide any sort of SLA for anybody, we haven't had any issues with the system yet. Those also they're there to help. Although there isn't, another thing that's on my list of things to do is to provide more documentation and how to and lessons learned. If you go to CTF.0x-evilcode.com, you get the framework, the CTF framework. If you drop that subdomain, you just get my WordPress site. And I'm trying to start to put more documentation and lessons learned out there. But if you go there, you'll see that not all that information has been captured yet. So again, part of that community that I'd like to be a part of building.
That's great, Josh. And again, that's obviously one of the roles of National CyberWatch Center, is to help develop some of those communities and Of course, the curriculum standards panel is an example of that, and at some future point, we may want to actually set up a standards panel related to just the whole design of kind of competitions or other, really what we would typically call challenge exercises. Because as you pointed out today, it doesn't have to be a competition. It could be something that I'm using as a learning experience to improve my ability to respond to unknown events. And that kind of raises some interesting issues I'd like your thoughts on. I mean, you've kind of touched on the fact that, many of these, challenges have really focused on the challenge design itself. And clearly that's an important component, obviously. They have to be designed well. But one of the things that we've noticed just in looking across the plethora of kind of challenge environments that are out there is there hasn't been sort of the same level of depth of thinking on assessment, as you pointed out, or even instructional content that could adequately prepare an individual to be ready for that situation. And there's been research that we actually conducted from National CyberWatch that indicates if an individual is not ready for that challenge, it could actually dissuade them from continuing to pursue the profession and thinking that they're just not able to perform well in a cybersecurity role. And we clearly need more people in those roles, so we don't want to dissuade anybody. So what are your thoughts in terms of extending this really to look more detailed into assessment or supporting instruction?
Yeah, that was another big challenge because I know when I compete, and you worry initially that this is just you, but when you're embarking on a CTF, it's a solo endeavor. You're really isolated. It's really pretty lonely. And I know, at least initially, and even to this day when I compete in CTFs, that if I'm not able to figure out a challenge and I see the scoreboard that everybody else is figuring out the challenge, it makes me feel dumb, and that I'm not capable of competing in this. I mean, a lot of CTFs have some sort of a theme. The Mandy at FireEye one is kind of a malware analysis CTF. So if I want to be a malware analyst, and I'm not successful in the CTF, well, maybe I should reconsider. And so that was, with some of the hint and the help, and I'm able to, with my students, coach them as we prepare for the CTF. So with that direct physical or in a virtual environment, the different mentoring and guidance I can provide them leading up to it, I think is important. You also saw that in some of the scoreboard displays, and that let's not worry about where others are doing. Let's just worry about what you are doing. And this CTF then becomes, your own personal journey of knowledge and growth. And you don't have to worry about the environment that you're in, because I still think that the CTF provides a valid, a venue for doing that. Even if you're just competing all by yourself, because a lot of people that do CTFs, there are plenty that want to do it to compete and to take those top honors and receive whatever accolades come with it. But there are many that it's just a pursuit of knowledge that they're after. So that's something that can be very difficult. And right, we don't want to dissuade. And so, as I said, a lot of the different ways in which I design my challenges are meant to do that. I know the students that are going through my courses when I associate a CTF with a particular class. I know what I've expected them to learn. I know how the students perform throughout that semester. And so I generally try to create a broad enough spectrum of challenges that, if they start with the easy ones, they can get those easy wins and hopefully build off of that momentum and build that confidence to tackle those more challenging. And then if I have a category that has, 4 different challenges in it, maybe that last challenge, or maybe only a couple categories, those highest point value challenges are truly really challenging, and I really do only expect a handful of students to actually figure them out, barring any misconfiguration on my part of how I embedded the flag.
That makes sense. Again, a reminder for everyone, you could post a question or comment in the chat. Also, you can use the raise hand feature if you'd like to just voice a comment. So you mentioned some interesting aspects today. One of the things I'm really excited about the platform you've introduced to us today is that it can really help others to contribute to the development of these challenges. And You know, the competency-based mastery learning initiatives that we're promoting and facilitating through the Curriculum Standards Panel program are really continuous learning processes, right? They're designed to enable to enhance capability really across a lifetime, not only during school, but they're also continuous development within the products themselves. And so what I'd like you to maybe as a final question, if others don't chime in here, is to maybe think a little bit about or share your thoughts on how those attending the webcast today or listening to it in the future might participate with you in contributing to the work you're doing.
I'm interested in figuring out the best way to start to grow a community. I haven't embarked on trying to grow an online community before, and so a lot of this I'm just kind of stumbling and fumbling my way through. The website is meant right now as a way to disseminate the information, but primarily, as you can see when you go there, it's just the platform itself. My email right now is the best, whether we set up a Slack or we join another initiative or a group. You know, maybe I can tie this momentum in with the nice subgroup or with some of the groups that, the initiatives that you'd mentioned. I'm just looking for that type of recommendation. If I had enough people reach out and we decided to find a good venue for further communication and collaboration, I would love to do that. And then also decide the process around it. Do we restrict, because that was one of the things I initially did, was I restricted access to the framework because I wanted to vet and validate that only other academics were able to get access to create CTFs and get into the repository. But then I haven't really received an overwhelming response. And so I was afraid that maybe that was just too much of a barrier right now to get that initiative, that momentum going for the community. So I've removed that. But I'd like to, that could be something that I'd like to discuss. What do we actually consider protected or sensitive aspects of being a part of this community to grow this initiative? So right now the email, unfortunately, I'd like to get rid the world of email. If there's one thing I do before I leave this earth, it'd be to get rid the world of email. But email is the best method to get a hold of me and to continue to try to grow this effort.
Terrific. All right. Well, for everyone, again, don't forget to save the date for the next virtual brown bag lunch. The VBBL, as the acronym goes. Webcasts occur each month on the second Wednesday and Friday. Thank you for attending today's virtual brown bag lunch. I would like to again thank Josh for sharing his experience in developing CTFs for the classroom. As a reminder, also, competency-based mastery learning libraries are currently being developed by the Curriculum Standards Panel members across an array of cybersecurity domains. And each month, a virtual brown bag lunch presentation provides you an opportunity to learn about and see a demonstration of specific CBML curriculum libraries or instructional modules or tools, such as we saw today, that you may implement in your environment to raise cybersecurity capability maturity of students or the workforce. We hope to see you again next month. Have a wonderful day.